Code-derived associations. This article will demonstrate how to use code-derived associations to implement user-defined class constraints. Code-derived association is derived association without provided derived OCL expression. The logic must be implemented in your code. Please read Malcolm Grove's articles if you are not sure what derived association is. These two articles are the most relevant to the subject. ECO, Derived Associations. ECO, Derived Attributes Part 2, Code-derived attributes problem. Often users ask us if we can make one or another field of our system mandatory. They would like to have more required fields or certain data validation rules to achieve better quality of stored information. Solution: sample project used in this article will demonstrate how to implement custom, user-defined class constraints for person class. User can create his own simple data validation rules and system will check the rules against the objects in database every time user creates/accesses objects or changes object attributes. This is different from defining design time class constraints, which is provided by ECO framework, because user will be able to set his own class constraints at runtime, store them in database and use throughout the system. In my application I have created two classes, person and person constraint. Class person represents person and its attributes and class person constraint stores all user-defined constraints rules for person object. Person constraint class has string attributes OCL expression and error message. Attribute OCL expression contains OCL expression to be evaluated against selected person object. Attribute error message contains a string to display in GUI if constraint/rule validation failed. Also I have created a derived association between person and person constraint. Association and broken constraints returns all violated constraints for person object. Because I didn't specify derived OCL for the association, I need to provide implementation of derived association in my code. For association and broken constraints I created a function declared like this: public iList broken constraints derive and subscribe, iSubscriber re-evaluate subscriber, iSubscriber resubscribe subscriber. Association AND has multiplicity n and function should return iList. The other details of its declaration are similar to code-derived attribute function. See Malcolm Grove's blogs. In my function, I create a new object implementing iList. For example, ArrayList object. Go through all person constraint objects. Evaluate each OCL expression on person object. If validation fails, I add person constraint object to the list. Return result list echo uses this function to get broken constraints association end. Though function returns iList, echo framework transforms result to iPerson constraint list. This is done by adapter class in the framework. To re-evaluate broken constraints for every object, every time object gets updated, I subscribe on person object changes using re-evaluate subscriber and resubscribe subscriber like this. os.evaluate and subscribe, this as I object. C.ocl expression, re-evaluate subscriber, resubscribe subscriber. Another thing, thanks to Jan Norton for help, is to subscribe on person constraints OCL expressions changes, os.evaluate and subscribe, null. Person constraint. All instances.ocl expression, re-evaluate subscriber, resubscribe subscriber. This subscription forces all OCL expressions to be re-evaluated for all existing person objects when new person constraint is added. This is how my code-derived association function looks. Public iList broken constraints derive and subscribe. iSubscriber re-evaluate subscriber. iSubscriber resubscribe subscriber. ArrayList broken constraints equals new ArrayList. iObject list constraints equals null. iEqualService OS equals iEqualService as iObject. Service provider. Get ecoservice. Type of iEqualService. iElement equals null. Object OCL result equals null. / get all constraints equals os.evaluate and subscribe, null. Person constraint. All instances, null, null. If E is iObject list, constraints equals iObject list, E / subscribe on all OCL expressions os.evaluate and subscribe, null. Person constraint. All instances.ocl expression, re-evaluate subscriber, resubscribe subscriber. / go through all constraints and evaluate expressions on the object for int I equals 0, iPerson constraint C equals constraints I. As object as person constraint, if C.ocl expression equals continue, E equals os.evaluate and subscribe, this as I object, C.ocl expression, re-evaluate subscriber, resubscribe subscriber. If E equals null, OCL result equals E. As object, / add to list if constraint is broken. If convert. To Boolean, OCL result, broken constraints. Add C, return broken constraints, and this is my application. Now I can create my own class constraints/rules entering OCL expressions and error messages. Every time I access person object or change its attributes, program evaluates these OCL expressions and displays a list of error messages for selected person object. If I add more rules, they get validated on selected person object. As soon as selected person object conforms my custom class constraints, error messages disappear. Source code can be downloaded from here.